Welcome to Ancient Geeks, a podcast from a couple of geeks of a certain age. From our youth to present day, we look at the development of fantasy and science fiction culture and all its manifestations. We were geek before it was chic. I am your co-host, Stephen Taylor. Come walk the pattern with us.
And I'm the shadow reflection of the real Tom Grant.
Well, who needs the real Tom Grant? We have a shadow.
Yeah,
anyway,
right. I'm much more amiable than the real one. Less negative.
Oh, dear. Well, today on Ancient Geeks, we're talking about Roger Zelazny's first Amber series. Before we get at all that, though, what have you been doing this week in geekery, Tom?
Well, for Halloween, I decided I would rewatch Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, or Bram Stoker's Dracula, I should say. Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I hadn't seen it since it came out, and I really didn't like it. And you know what? I really didn't like it again. For all the same reasons. It was the triumph of visuals, as a very cinematic form of spectacle over practically everything else. The acting was bad, and not just Keanu. Anthony Hopkins was kind of embarrassing. But it was just incredible visuals, right? So
Right.
Coppola had the pull to be able to get all these interesting setups for, you just say, like in a single scene, you would have several amazing shots. It reminded me a lot of the movies House, the Japanese haunted house movie, and Kwaidan, and these very surrealistic sort of visuals. I know that he was going for that and other things that were cinematic references, but as a movie, it was just hard to watch. I did pause it on several times to go do something else and come back, and I powered through it,
To go sort the mail and fold laundry?
But it almost sucked the life out of me. Sorry, fans of that movie. I am not part of your brethren.
Isn't a vampire supposed to suck the life out of you? So mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. How about you? What have you been doing?
So I'm going to go real contemporary, and I've been watching Vince Gilligan's new series Pluribus on Apple TV. I highly recommend it. It's almost impossible to say anything about it without. It's just impossible to say anything about it, really. I think it's really, really good so far. As of recording, I'm 3 episodes in. By the time this posts, there'll be 4 episodes. I really do recommend it very much. So Pluribus on Apple TV.
Excellent.
Maybe we'll talk about it later. I don't know.
Yeah. I haven't started it yet, but I'm eager to.
It's worth it.
Okie doke.
So yeah. I'm still hosting. That's right. Anyway,
what? Where am I?
Yeah, that's right.
Who am
still
I?
In charge. Who am I? Where am I? So if we could, moving on.
Wait. I'll do a very old reference. Admiral Stockdale.
Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Gridlock. Anyway, yeah. Now it's ancient humor on Ancient Geeks.
Yes,
ancient political
humor.
Yeah. So if you could pick music that we could afford to license, what music would you pick for this episode, Tom?
Well, this will seem out of left field until we get to a deeper discussion of the Amber series, but I picked, because I never could settle on one. I picked either Henry Mancini's Experiment in Terror, or the Noah Cross section of the Chinatown soundtrack by Jerry Goldsmith. In fact, those are both film noir soundtrack bits or music bits. So, but it'll become clear why.
So I went pop music. Okay. I'm going to go Perfect World by Huey Lewis and the News.
Well, there we go.
Or In the Real World by the Alan Parsons Project, which I think I may have referenced before, but yeah.
I think prog rock would be actually pretty good for.
Yeah, it would actually. It works for various reasons. Okay, so we have 5 novels we're discussing today in what is the first Amber series, The Chronicles of Amber, by Roger Zelazny, published in the 1970s. So how did you first encounter these novels, Tom?
Well, it was on the shelf, I think at our family's bookstore, and I'd heard good things about it. People had recommended it left and right, And it was the first Zelazny I may have read. I might have read a short story, but I don't think I read any
Right.
novels by him. And I was hooked, and I read as many of those novels as were available at the time, which was not all of them. He hadn't written all of them yet.
Right.
And
Because you're more ancient than I am.
I'm just decrepit, and I loved the ideas in in the books. Anyway, we'll get to what we liked and didn't like.
Sure.
But anyway, it really grabbed me.
Yeah, so I encountered it in high school. So there was this in my high school, of the two high schools I attended, the one that was in Midway High School in Hewitt, Texas. There was this cardboard display box of paperback books that I don't know where they came
Hmm.
from. And my friend, the same one that pronounced Melnibone, found the Guns of Avalon in this cardboard display and read it and was taken with it.
Did
And
he
that led
pronounce Avalon Avalon?
he did not to my recollection. Um,
Ambeer?
Amber, no, none of that. Nonetheless, this led me to go to the used bookstore to track down the first novel, Nine Princes and Amber, probably at the Golden's Book Exchange that I've mentioned before, and was just taken at that point and was off to the races. And I'm sure it was the first Zelazny that I read, and it certainly did lead to more Zelazny in my life. But I really was taken with the title. I think we were both taken with because we knew the Guns of Navarone, so it all sounded kind of
Yeah.
cool. And Avalon has the reference to fantasy and
Hmm.
King Arthur and all that stuff. So yeah, but it was that was how I encountered it all. So
So you looked
let's
for it on the lower right section
yeah, it
of
was
the
always
bookshelves.
yeah, it started a
Yeah.
lifelong progress of always look a process of always going to the bookstore and looking at the very end of the alphabet to see if Zelazny had written something else that I had not read.
I still do that. I mean, not looking for Zelazny
Yeah, yeah.
specifically because he's passed away a long time ago,
Yes.
but just at the bookstore looking to see if particular authors are in print. So
Yes.
like, oh,
Yes.
I was pleasantly surprised to see there was a single volume edition available now, practically in every Barnes and Noble I've ever been to in the last year that has all 10 Amber books,
Yeah,
including the
what's a Barnes and
series.
Noble?
Yeah.
What's a
What?
Barnes and Noble? No, I'm
Oh.
kidding.
You threw me there.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
threw me there.
No, in Zelazny, it's worth noting. I should have said something or put in my notes to remind myself. But yeah, Zelazny unfortunately died young. He died, I believe, at age 58 of he had colorectal cancer, and there was another complication that I read just yesterday. I was aware of this, and we were unfortunately, I think, robbed of a whole lot more writing from Zelazny because he died quite young.
Yeah, well said.
I did have the opportunity to see Zelazny, and I think I may have mentioned this in a past podcast. Again, my friend, who was my compatriot in all things geekery for at least in high school and in college, we attended the Dallas Comic Con or Fantasy Fair, I forget what it was called, Fantasy Science Fiction Convention in I don't know, let's just say the late 80s, I guess. And he was one of the guests, and I got to see him on a panel, and that was really cool. Seemed like a very nice fellow, soft-spoken, and witty, but unfortunately passed way too young.
Yeah, he did a book signing at our bookstore. I got to meet him and just kind of hang out with him
Oh, cool.
as he was talking to fans. It's just a really delightful person.
Was he wearing a denim vest? Because he was in Dallas.
No, it was not. I have pictures though. I have pictures. Maybe
Oh, awesome. We should put those
maybe
on
I'll
the on
I'll post
Substack
them. Yeah.
or I mean, or oh yeah, something would be great.
Or other social media
Or
outlets to
oh
which
yeah,
we
we're all
contribute.
over a Blue Sky and Reddit
Our
and all that
vast our
stuff.
vast media empire.
Yes, it is quite the empire indeed, or perhaps the shadow of an empire. At any rate,
Okay.
so if you were going to just briefly, because obviously we're going to spoil these now, what, almost 50-year-old books, right? Yeah, 50-year-old books, over 50-year-old books. What would you say to someone who had not read this series as to what's the pitch? What's your pitch?
But I would say imagine that our reality does exist, but it's only a shadow among many shadows of the one true reality. And the people who run the one true reality are real bastards. That would be my
Okay.
pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would probably that's part of it. I think I might pitch it also to deal with sort of it is a book in some ways about palace intrigue and politics and a powerful family or almost like a pantheon of demigods.
Right.
Um, and they're also still very sort of human frailties as they attempt to sort out who should be in charge.
Yeah, I think that I would definitely put the palace intrigue spin on it,
Yeah.
for people who were fans of Game of Thrones or,
Yes. Yes.
gritty fantasy, like Joe Abercrombie these days and so forth. And anyway, that's a big
I mean,
feature of it.
I- I'll go ahead and say this too, because I don't think it gives him any plot points away. And I think it was one of the things that I remember my friend describing when he read the book, which was the trumps, which are these playing cards that have pictures of the characters that can be used to communicate. And for some reason, this really grabbed me from the beginning, how cool this was. That you could
Oh
like
yeah.
take your cards out and stare at the card and then basically, to use a contemporary term, FaceTime with someone on the card. I guess I guess stop and think about it. With phones, it's a little less cool than it would have been when I read this in 80 whatever it was when I read 82, 81.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, yeah, the cards or the trumps were just I don't know. They did really it was one of those fantasy items that really grabbed me as a kid, and stick
Oh,
with the
same
book.
here. Same here. And the way that it's introduced in the first book too,
Yes,
that
yes,
he's rifling through a desk, the main character, Corwin, and finds a deck of cards with different people on them who seem familiar, including
yes,
himself.
yes. And they're cold to the touch. They're kind of clearly
Yeah.
something's fancy about them. Anyway, so no, I think if you're a reader of fantasy and for some reason never read this series of books, I highly recommend it. It's a quick read. I reread it several times over the years, and of course, reread it recently for the podcast. I do find it goes pretty quick, but it really it's very entertaining. I found it entertaining.
Oh yeah,
So,
extremely.
so any other non-spoiler things you want to talk about before we move into this discussion?
Well, so are the ideas in the books like the Trumps? You've already mentioned the Trumps.
Yeah,
So the other ideas were real grabbers too. The fact that our world existed, but it
yeah,
was a shadow of something else. That was a very cool idea. The pattern, that
yes,
there's a sort of reality anchoring thing that
right,
that's not just something that you can walk like you walk a labyrinth at a Episcopalian church, but it was also kind of intrinsic to kind of gluing together all the different realities that existed. That I made a joke about it at the beginning that you had shadow versions of
yes,
yourself
that's right.
around that that people
Um,
knew, and they assumed when they met you as you were traveling through these different universes, these different shadows, that you were that person sometimes.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm somewhat distracted by the notion of the Episcopalian labyrinth. That sounds like a novel title. But
But
yeah,
not by Dan Brown. He's only up for
that's
the
right.
Catholics, not the
That's right.
Episcopalians.
No, but I mean, yeah, this whole notion of a multiverse that's this sort of these idea of shadows and how the royal family can manipulate shadow and they can walk through it. It's not like other multiverses where you have to find some kind of portal to go from one to the other or something. It's really this they can manipulate the very stuff of reality and move through these realities, which I think was
Right.
pretty cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
so before we get into any other spoiler territory, I think the other thing that was striking at the time, and still is that this is very atypical fantasy, and that was very true of Zelazny in general. Like
Yes. Yeah.
he would write books like Lord of Light, which looked like a fantasy book when you first glanced at it, but was really a science fiction book,
Right.
or Jack of Shadows, where there was a planet that half the planet was governed by magic, the other half by technology.
Right.
And this was, I think that part of the popularity was there was nothing like it,
That's right.
and Zelazny was a good writer, so he pulled something off that was very distinctive. And there haven't been any imitators really either.
No, I agree.
I mean, there was somebody who tried to finish the another series based on notes that he left, but otherwise, there hasn't been anything like it in fantasy. And it was a time of very distinctive fantasy too. Like
Yeah, I
you
agree.
had that on the same shelf as sword and sorcery characters
Hmm.
like Conan and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. You had our much discussed Elric of Melniboné and the other
Hmm.
Eternal Champions books. That there were these very different strains, aside from Tolkien, of fantasy that weren't just the same Western European mold. I mean, this was really something else, and we'll get into what the something else means
Right.
as we go here.
So I was going to say we should. There are five novels, right? And I
Yeah.
think we should talk about them individually, at least in brief. But let's start with Nine Princes in Amber. So we're now going to move into spoiler territory, which is the first of the five books. And I think I'll go ahead and spoil it, right? We both ranked these books and we ranked them identically, and this is our favorite book of the
Yeah.
series, correct?
Yeah.
And I find it really fun because it starts out and our main character has amnesia and we don't know anything about anything. And it's a slow
Right.
reveal as he tries to figure out who he is. It's Corwin who is ultimately find out is part of this royal family. He's in fact, in a conflict with his brother over the throne because their father has disappeared. Oberon, he's in conflict with Eric, his brother. And all we know is he's like in a mental institution. He's been drugged, and he doesn't know anything about himself. And he has to figure out that his sister's been looking over him, and it goes through this whole process, right? And the novel goes on from there as he discovers all the things we just discovered that he is in fact from the city Amber, and that they have these powers to walk through shadow, and so forth and so on. And then there's a conflict, and he ends up in prison at the end of the book that he then escapes. But
Yeah.
it really is, I think, it was a really fun read even now. And at the time, it was sort of, I don't know, kind of a mind-blowing read. What's your feeling about that book?
Yeah, it was a book that took a point of view character and stuck with him.
Hmm.
And there's another writer who did that with Raymond Chandler, whom I think
Right.
Zelazny must have loved Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and so forth, because ultimately this is like a hard-boiled detective or noir novel.
Hmm.
You know only as much as the character knows,
Right.
and you follow that character just looking over his shoulder for the course of five books. And there are other things too that are very noirish, like all the intrigues that are going on and the
Hmm.
morally gray characters and
Right.
people who make decisions that have catastrophic consequences later on. I found out from listening to Zelazny talk about his book when he was at our store that he had the idea initially of someone finding a pack of cards with their own face on one of the cards and
Hmm.
didn't know what to do with the idea and kind of put it in his drawer, and then pulled it out again and finally then had the rest of the inspiration to write the Amber novels. So it is a sort of very careful walkthrough for people who are into world building. Um,
Is that
this
aimed at me?
no, 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 but for people who like world building in itself as a fantasy component, or think that that's important to do good of fantasy, to do good world building. This is a very deft book in giving you piece by piece what's important
Hmm.
about the Amber universes.
Yeah, I thought about the world building element of it. It's not super heavy into it, but it does flesh things out quite a bit.
Yeah,
There are certainly key important elements. And there are also some things I think we'll talk about later that I'm not sure he figured out and just kind of hand waved away, to be honest. But
yeah.
we'll come to that in a minute.
Yeah, so you have a scene where he finds the trumps, and you have a scene
Hmm.
where he has to walk the pattern, and
Yeah.
there's a scene where they go to this sort of reflection of Amber Repma, and
Hmm.
you get piece by piece introductions to all the different uh, uh, other characters, mostly his siblings,
Right.
and then the backstory that they have that then fleshes out what Amber is all about.
Right. 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 So, yeah, because he starts in the beginning of the novel, he doesn't have his memory. He learns pieces of it over time and then kind of bluffs his way to getting to walk this shadow of the pattern or this reflection of the pattern in Rebma. And then when you walk the pattern, his memory comes back. And walking the pattern is what gives the royal family their capacity to walk in shadows and to sort of access their powers.
Yeah,
And all of this leads to him eventually. So there's a whole nine princes in Amber, right? So there's nine brothers, and I always forget how many sisters. One of the things the book does a very poor job of doing is ever fleshing out the sisters.
yes,
They're
yeah,
just a couple of them have some roles to play, but the sisters are almost like afterthoughts. And I'll be honest, one of the critiques, I'll go ahead and lay it out right now. There are a lot of characters, but they're not super distinct characters.
no,
The ones that really, I mean, Corwin, the main character, is fleshed out. His brother Random, who shows up very early and helps him get back to Amber, is fleshed out. Eric, his adversary, is kind of fleshed out. At least we know he's bad.
Well, and we get more depth to him in
Yeah, we do.
later books.
His brother Julian, we kind of at least has. Then it becomes they almost have like these individual characteristics. Right? Julian is the
Right.
master of Arden Forest. He's a hunter. Gerard is strong and kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Um,
Benedict is the ultimate general.
yeah, Benedict's the ultimate general is Jul. I'm gonna get him confused now. Who's the master of the seas? I've read this book multiple times. I can't keep them all straight.
Yeah.
They all have like one or two characteristics, and that's kind of it. And that's part of that's a negative of the book, in my opinion. There's always characters we really don't know that much about them.
Hmm.
But eventually there's this but there is this intrigue, right, about the sort of shifting alliances amongst the siblings, and because the whole thing about the father disappearing, Oberon disappears, and who's going to be at the throne. Eric is acting as the regent. He has
Yeah.
the Jewel of Judgment, which is this symbol of power and also can be used for various things, including controlling the weather. And Corwin thinks that he should be king. And so it's that typical kind of power palace intrigue thing and who's going to win what. There's an assault on, at the end of the novel, there's an assault on Amber, which is in cahoots with his brother Blaze. And then they end up losing. And
Yeah.
Corwin gets his eyes burned out and thrown into prison, which is lots of fun, right?
Yeah. Well, we should
But
say, I don't think we've actually made it completely clear. Amber is a place. It's not just
yes,
like a footnote for the ultimate reality. There is a castle
it's a city.
that they all live in and a city around it, and there's a forest, and there's other things that look like standard medieval fantasy.
Yes.
And it's not exactly clear how big this place
No, it's
is.
not. It is not.
And that's actually okay, I think, just
Yeah,
to
it's
leave
fine.
that ambiguous, because it was almost is saying this castle and the city and the forest and the mountain, Colville, and so forth
Hmm.
are the things that matter.
Right. Right. No, one of the things, and again, it's not a big negative criticism, but it is something that I didn't. I don't know that I missed it per se, but it is a little confusing when you stop and think about it. Because beyond the royal family themselves, who are these people? Are they real people? Are they not real people that
Yeah.
occupy the city of Amber? How much of it really in the second series, I know you haven't read, there's a little more fleshing out of the city
Hmm.
of Amber. But it really is a little confusing as to because there's a grandiose. Well, I'll talk about this later a little bit too, I think. But there's a grandiose claim about this being reality, right? This is
Right.
reality. But then it really gets really fuzzy, if not shadowy, as
Hmm.
to what else. Where does reality stop? Does it really stop with just these dozen or so people? And but that doesn't totally make sense. Part of that kind of breaks down if you think about it too much. But it is. But you're right. The city is that is supposed to be the true reality. And in some
Yeah,
ways,
well,
it's supposed to be a symbol of order.
it's especially confusing since, at different times they pull people out of shadow,
Yes.
out of these other universes
Yes.
to be their collaborators or
Hmm.
servants or
Yes.
whatever. So are all these people who are not the royal family just people they've yanked out of shadow? You're right, it's not
Yeah.
clear.
That
Yeah.
part is a little confusing and isn't really quite fleshed out. I mean, I don't. Again, I don't think it detracts from the overall story,
Yeah.
but it does. One of those things where if you stop and think about it for a moment, it gets a little confusing, or at least a little. It doesn't make total sense.
Right, because
Um,
the other universes, the other shadows that exist, those are real in the sense that it's not like, you squint at them and they disappear in a puff of
right.
smoke. That
Right.
if you do make a friend in
Yes.
shadow and decide to have adventures with them and they come to Amber and so forth, they're just as real as the people who are there and
That's right.
tangibility and
That's right.
persistence and so forth.
Yes. That's right. And seemingly, self-awareness and free will and all those things. They're not shadow in the sense that they're just mere reflections. That part is always a little confusing. But anyway,
Yeah. In fact, there's
uh,
like a person since Corwin starts in our world, like
yes,
there's a neighbor he's friends with
yes,
who pops up a couple of times
yes,
in future novels, and he kind of has questions about Corwin given his
yes,
strange comings and goings. But anyway, he just again he's a person. It's not.
Yeah,
So I don't want to
and
give the impression that shadow means unreal.
that's right. That's right. They dismiss it as somewhat insignificant sometimes.
Yes.
And that part of the element of the story that kind of reminds me of a sort of the Greek gods or some other kind of pantheon is that they do
Hmm.
treat everything else as though it is less important than they are in some ways. Although I think one of the interesting elements of the story is that I think Corwin starts to feel a little guilty about that over time,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and sort of changes his more callous attitude toward these individuals because he recruits an army. They all have lots of them die in the process of
Yeah.
assaulting Amber and all this kind of stuff.
And they really manipulate these guys. I mean,
Yes,
in the reality they come from, they worship the Amberites.
yes, that's
You
right.
know, with their manifestations in that universe.
Well, at least in some shadows.
Yeah,
In some
right.
shadows, they're not aware of them.
And it's
But
really interesting, you know, and it's ambiguous even to some extent to the royal family characters themselves,
mhm.
exactly how this works. Because
Yes,
like in throughout the novels, you'll have Corwin riding along on a horse, and he says, "Okay, when I go around the side of this hill, I need there to be a river."
that's right.
And so he's moving into a reality where the river is there. And it's like, oh, now I need there to be not a blue sky, but a copper colored sky.
Right. That's right.
And I need to find under the tree that's now made out of silver, I need to find a backpack that has food in it. You know,
Right. That's right.
so are
No,
they
and
manipulating reality?
are they creating?
Are they
Yeah.
creating these things? Are they entering realities where they just conveniently exist?
Because
It's questionable.
yeah, it's in theory, I guess there's at least one interpretation is there's an infinite number of combinations and they have the capacity to find the combination that they want.
Yeah.
But it is, yeah. I mean,
So how do they find their way back to a specific shadow then is the
that's the
question.
yeah. I theoretically, I guess by that's even well by imagining all the specific things correctly and then changing as they travel. But it still is a little confusing, and it doesn't. I'm not sure it's always consistent, but that's okay. It's kind of fun anyway.
But one thing I'll say about it is, and this is something that I read in an interview by with Zelazny, that he sets up the rules and then he plays by them, right? He
Right.
says there is a technology, basically a magical technology here at
Right.
work, and I'm not going to then sort of conveniently violate the rules of that, you know,
That's yeah.
for plot purposes. Uh,
Yeah.
and,
I don't
and,
think. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I agree with you. I don't think he ever deviates from his rules as a cheat. I think occasionally he's not sure how the rules work and or forgets how they work
Yeah,
a
and
little bit.
he's finding out some of the inner workings too
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
along
yeah.
the way.
So let's think about sort of again sort of the broad list, and then we can talk about whatever
Okay.
specifics you want. So there's nine princes in Amber. We've already sort of talked about that. Then there's Corwin. Of course, again, we didn't talk about this too much. It's the fun ending or the fascinating ending because a lot of mysteries get set up in Nine Princes in Amber. He encounters Dworkin, who he doesn't, I don't think realizes at this point that it's his grandfather. I'm not sure if,
Yeah.
but
So
he's
Dworkin's the chief technologist, since we're
yeah,
talking about magical
he's
technology.
basically Merlin in some ways, and then but he's also the creator of Amber. We find out.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that, I think. But he's imprisoned also, and had been imprisoned by Corwin's father, Oberon, because Dworkin was going to lose in his mind. But
Hmm.
he is a shapeshifter, and he's the one that created the trumps. And he can draw whatever he draws. He can draw a magical, basically a trump, and you can look at the
Hmm.
trump and travel through it. And that's how Corwin escapes. He asked Dworkin to draw a particular location, and then Corwin's able to go through that drawing to that location and escape. And then he wants to go back to this shadow he once lived in called Avalon, where he'd found a substance because technology doesn't work in Amber, at least
Hmm.
Earth technology, right? So he finds out that there's a substance that he can use that functions like gunpowder in Amber, and he can use it to create weapons to then attack his brother Eric.
Hmm.
And he finds he's walking through Shadow, and he finds this place, and various things happen. I'm not going to try to summarize all these novels. We'll be here all day, but that really is about him discovering this person Ganelon that this resembles a past ally from Shadow who becomes a key character. He encounters his brother Benedict, and also his brother Benedict's like great granddaughter Dara, who becomes a key character and
Right.
in fact becomes the mother of Corwin's son. And we start to see this thing about this black road that's been through Shadow to Amber, attacking Amber. These creatures are coming through this road, and at this point, Corwin thinks it's his death curse that he put on Eric that created this black road. We find out later it's a little more complicated than that.
Hmm.
But this is also, I would say, Nine Princes and Amber and the Guns of Avalon, without again getting into much more detail, although we can see what you want to talk about them. They're two more complete novels. There's a bit of a shift in the third novel, The Sign of the Unicorn, and I realized
Yeah.
that part of the reason Sign of the Unicorn is the third novel, the fourth novel is The Hand of Oberon, and the fifth novel is The Courts of Chaos. All three of those novels were serialized in magazines first.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of why they read differently to me. They feel a little different.
Yeah.
There's also a kind of a tonal shift, especially in Sign of the Unicorn almost feels like a fantasy Agatha Christie novel. They're all in the room and they're all like trying to figure out who did this murder
Hmm.
and how to rescue their brother and all this stuff. But
Again, very film noirish.
yes, it was.
Yeah.
I think so. We both liked the first two novels the best, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And then the
Definitely.
fourth novel we said third, which is The Hand of Oberon, and then The Sign of the Unicorn, and then The Courts of Chaos.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
Um, I would say the first two stories are also really more about the conflict between Corwin and Eric, and us kind of discovering how this world works.
Right.
Because Eric dies at the end of the second novel, which was so when I read it first, I was kind of surprised. That felt like that was the whole quest, but that was not the whole quest. And Corwin's kind of in charge starting in the third novel. And then they turn their attention to the mystery of their missing brother Brand, who's kind of contacted them all a couple of times, kind of, but no
Hmm.
one knows where he is. And they rescue Brand, and Brand becomes really the central villain for the rest of the series.
Right.
And those three novels are a little more of a, I guess, serialized story. Those three novels together are more contained, would you not say?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So I mean, what about all these sort of the whole cycle or specific novels that would you like to talk about, or is there anything, or do you want to talk about
Well,
characters and plot points?
so the as you said, the last three novels are really about the conflict with the person who turns out to be the chief villain, the kind of
Hmm.
the enemy from within, but also about the courts of chaos
Yes.
because so Amber is real, but so too is this other entity, the courts of chaos.
Hmm.
And it's a bit like the Moorcock concept of chaos, that it is
Hmm.
it's sort of pure disorder
Right.
with a little bit of enough coherence that
Right.
there are people and they wear armor and so forth. But
Right.
beyond that, everything's kind of crazy.
Yes.
Um, and I thought that one of the things that's weaker about the remaining three books in the series is that you never really get a good handle on the Courts of Chaos. I mean, they're set up
Agreed.
as the big adversary. Ooga booga, here comes the Courts of Chaos. They're the ones who are sending their troops frenetically down the Black Road towards Amber, but you just don't really
Yeah.
get much insight into them by
I
the
think
time you
that
finish the fifth book.
the main problem was the Wooga Booga as their main battle cry.
It's always a bad battle cry.
No, yeah. So
It's
yeah,
like
this
Ooga
whole
Chaga, Ooga Chaga. It's no better. No better.
I'm hooked. I'm hooked on that feeling. Um, but there this concept of the Black Road's introduced very early on, and this sort of this thing that cuts through all the shadows and these creatures, and they're
Right.
attacking Amber, and Eric's having to defend Amber, and blah blah blah. And we find that Dara, which I mentioned a moment ago, is somehow her grandmother may have been someone from the Courts of Chaos, and she was
Yeah.
allied with the Courts of Chaos. And then later we find out that Brand and Fiona and Blaze were all conspiring with the Courts of Chaos to like attack Amber and yada yada.
Until two of them
Until
decided not to.
yeah, and that's when they put Brand in prison and yada yada. But so there's all this interesting intrigue stuff that I'm not going to get into the grand detail. But let's talk about the Courts of Chaos and Amber. So yeah, on the one hand, it is supposed to be order versus chaos, literally
Yeah.
chaos, and Amber's supposed to be order, and supposedly this is all. But the part that this is where I will nitpick how can Amber be the one true world if it comes out of the courts of chaos? Because as the mythology goes,
Mhm.
Dworkin left the courts of chaos and then created the pattern at the other end of the universe,
Right.
and apparently mated with the unicorn, which we can get into that, I guess. And then Oberon is a son, and
Hmm.
then somehow Oberon then apparently has perhaps as many as 42 kids with various women over time. If we take the whole cycle of the novels and
Yeah.
populates Amber.
There's a Wikipedia page that lays
Oh yeah,
out
it's just
like who were the children of Oberon
yes.
by which
Oh, the
mothers?
named ones, and there are a
Of
whole
the
bunch
named
of
ones.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. So it, but so in some ways is not. This is the part that I think I almost feel like he was making some of this up as he was going.
Oh, definitely he was.
Yeah.
Definitely he was.
And so, how can you be the one? I'll nitpick now. How can you be the one true world if you're actually second in
Right.
creation? Because doesn't it make chaos the one true world, and then Amber is kind of a derivative, and then I don't know. But
There's a
um,
lot of rug pulling that goes on about what's the real reality, the real
yes,
ultimate reality.
yes, that's right. Because
Yeah.
then there's a pattern, there's the primal pattern,
Yeah.
and then eventually Corwin makes his own pattern and disappears into theoretically another universe. I don't anyway, and how that's different than a shadow is never clear. And it's one of those things I know I don't think you cared about. I would have loved Zelazny to have written about that, but he died before he did that. Although the second Amber series does exist, but it's not about that. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of it's a little confusing, and exactly what the courts of chaos want is a little confusing. I think ultimately, except they just want to
Mhm.
they want to create more chaos. But again, I agree with you that the chaos that Moorcock had was more chaotic than the chaos that Zelazny provides. It just
Yeah.
feels like two opposite powers rather than really two forces of nature as much as they say that it is. I think the comp to me in some ways is that the courts of chaos are the Titans and Amber's Olympus.
Yeah. 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 I think that's a fair comparison.
And I tried to map I can only map random could be Loki and Gerard could be Hercules, but after that it doesn't. I can't make them fit anything. But
But it's
anyway,
interesting how often chaos comes up as an adversary in fantasy.
yes, yes.
So there's Moorcock, there's Zelazny, there's the Warhammer and Warhammer 40K settings. Even like one of Poul Anderson's books has chaos in it, that with a sort of a different motif. Anyway,
You get some of it in
yeah.
Starlin's Warlock too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, chaos bad, right? I mean, chaos just sounds chaotic. Who needs that?
But you need balance. You
Yes.
need a little, or maybe even more than a little chaos.
You need to bring balance to the force.
That's it, exactly. If you don't want like too many midichlorians,
Oh well, then
it
then
just
God knows what you end up with. Okay, so um,
some sort of rare Jedi disease about midichlorian excess.
I I found the Course of Chaos is my least favorite book. It's fine. I don't dislike it, but again, I think partially because it was written in a serialized format for I think it was Galaxy Science Fiction magazine,
Right.
and I also kind of felt like Zelazny didn't know what to do with the main story, so he sent Corwin on this side quest throughout the entire novel, which is it's a very
Yeah.
abstract walk through shadow. But the main action's happening over here. There's a big battle between Amber and Chaos that we literally see in the distance at one point.
Right.
Oberon tries to fix the primal pattern. We don't get to see that either. It's kind of like an odd. It's almost like we don't have the budget for that, so we're just going to focus on this. Except it's a novel, which you shouldn't have to do that. What was your impression about the end? And were you satisfied with the
Well,
end?
not horribly. I mean, I think it was fine that it didn't end with Corwin on top of everything
No, yeah,
and everybody. Again, very noirish to have an ambiguous ending like that. I just it felt like he needed to come to a conclusion. He didn't have a clear idea how to do it,
yeah.
and as is the case with many kind of bits of popular culture where you start out with neat ideas, but you don't have a
hmm
clear arc in
Right,
mind.
right.
It's very hard to stick the landing, whether it's I think Zelazny does a pretty good job, not a great
Yeah, yeah,
job. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
way better than Lost or Battlestar Galactica or X-Files or other things that just sort of
Hmm.
like completely wandered into the realm of chaos, at least from a writing standpoint. But it could have been better. It could have
Yeah,
definitely could have.
I was satisfied with it. Um, but yeah, it did kind of feel like, okay, well, it's over. I think the main thing that I felt less satisfaction with was the whole conflict with the Courts of Chaos, which just seemed to kind of, well, okay, we're done.
Right.
I'm not really sure why we're done, but we're done.
They're and sending
Um,
endless legions of monsters against Amber who are just,
yes.
fanatic in their desire to slice and dice every amberite they can get their hands on. And then it just stops.
Yeah, it just kind of stops. That was, I agree. That was, anyway. Um,
Also, too, that there's a kind of a major plot point about creating a new pattern
yes.
that then just doesn't seem to have much of a relevance to the way that the novels ended.
Now, it's dealt with a little bit in the second series of novels, but I know that you haven't read, and I haven't read in a
Right.
while now. Um, all we know is that, I guess this actually is not spoilers for the second Amber series. Um, we do know that, which is not in the, because I was thinking it was in the Courts of Chaos, but it's not. We know from that series of novels that at some point Corwin walks his new pattern and
Hmm.
disappears into the new universe that was created by that.
Yeah.
And he eventually comes back briefly, but we don't really know what that's like a whole other set of adventures that theoretically could have been written, but never
Yeah.
was. And I believe that Merlin, his son, also walks that pattern at some point, but it is sort of set as a sort of side mystery that never gets dealt with, certainly not in these novels, and
Yeah.
even then, not really in those novels either. Um,
I did wind up rereading this time sections just to kind of keep clear exactly who the factions were
mhm.
and what was their decision making process behind what they did.
Yes,
And I think it was a little problematic in part because there were too many characters,
yes,
too many balls in the air, moving in too many different directions, and also I felt like the kind of the attempt to redeem some of these characters was a little forced.
agreed. Well, it's also there's like a bunch of guys with B's in their names, and then there's a bunch of
Yes.
females with F's. And I really, even to this day, I like, okay, was it Flora? Flora was the one that was on Earth, and Fiona's the one that's the sorceress. And yeah, and then
Hmm.
some of them are just almost nondescript, really.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
he's bad with women, and it's not just that the women are
yeah,
flat as characters, but the B word gets used an awful lot.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. No,
Yeah,
there's
that
some,
was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable when I read it the first
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They just almost feel unimportant, and it was. It's funny. I noticed it this time more than I noticed it in the past, but I noticed it more this time than any other. There isn't even some kind of statement that, for whatever reason, male heirs are the only ones that matter. It just is
Right.
assumed. It's like
Yeah.
background that they just don't matter,
Right.
and which was odd. Now there's a little bit more female characters in the second series, but still, it's
Mhm.
Fiona becomes more significant. But anyway.
Well, just to beat my film noir comparison to death here a little more, none of these were really femme fatales, right? There wasn't
Mhm.
enough depth or texture to them as
Right.
characters to even qualify as that. Although, at least one of them is involved in the plot against Corwin, kind
Yeah.
of intimately from the very beginning.
Yeah. Fiona. But so I agree with you. It was actually somewhat refreshing that Corwin didn't just end up on the throne at the end of the series.
Yeah.
I At the time I don't think it occurred to me that Random would become king. That worked out fine.
Hmm.
One of the few characters that had any kind of really character development besides Corwin. I will say this: one of the things in the novel, especially reading it this time, really struck me. I think it struck me in the past as well, but like it, the one thing that novels don't really make the case for is why anybody wants to be king in the first place.
Right.
I mean, you can go in shadow. They make a little bit of discussions, but they never really quite explain it. You can go do whatever you want, wherever you want.
Hmm.
Why are these guys willing to trade comfort for power and
Right.
luxury? It just doesn't. And what does it even mean to be the king of Amber? Because
Well,
it
and
talks like
I,
it's a lot of
yeah.
work, but why is it a lot of work? I don't get it.
Well, and Zelazny, that is, even brings up that question in the book.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
And I don't recall how he answered it. It wasn't certainly satisfactorily, but at some point he does ask, like, why not just ride off into shadow and
yeah,
have the best time imaginable?
yeah. I don't. It's not.
I
But I
mean,
mean, clearly,
for Corwin, it's duty to some
yeah.
extent
I think it's duty. Well, I think it
and
starts out.
vengeance. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's vengeance. I think, and actually, one of the things I do like about the book is that Corwin starts out when he gets his memory back. He just kind of knows.
Hmm.
It's almost like an appetite more than anything else. He just knows he wants to be king,
Yeah.
and he knows he's mad at Eric. But
Hmm.
over time, it's like he kind of figures out what's the point of all this to some degree,
Right.
and does become more compassionate, I think. And there was this whole discussion about whether he's changed over time, and that's sort of interesting. But I mean, it is kind of interesting that Eric and Corwin in particular clearly are willing to sacrifice a lot, at least early on, to be king for reasons that are not totally clear. Uh, you know, and then Blaze, Brand, and Fiona and their whole plot, which is pretty involved. And then there's this reference to Findo and Osric. Findo, what a name!
Yeah.
One of the early brothers. They apparently tried to take over, and they got killed. It's just
Yeah.
it's just kind of
Hey,
I don't
my
know.
middle name is Findo. Just a damn minute.
Apologies, Tom F. Grant. Um,
That sounds like an invective right there. Thomas F. Grant.
uh, anyway, any other plot points we want to talk about?
I don't have any other big ones. I think I I think we hit on the fact that there were maybe too many characters, maybe too many conspiracies. Um, I I think that probably as you rightly said, you could read the first two books,
Hmm.
go off and explore other things by Zelazny, and I had
Yeah.
some recommendations for that, but
Oh yes.
and then come back to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
just as
it's
just to wrap it up.
it's compelling, but I guess I mean I certainly enjoyed reading all five of them together. I just feel like it really there's something about it, and I think it's the serialized nature of the publication, and also the fact that one major plot point, that being Eric, is wrapped up in the first two novels.
Yeah.
Um, that the first two just have a slightly different tone. They feel a little more, there's a little more depth to the writing in some ways, or maybe it's the
Yes.
plotting. Um, and there's kind of a tonal shift. It's not a major tonal shift, but there's a tonal shift. Um, and I also do kind of feel like it's one of those things I would love to be able to talk to Zelazny about all this. Um, how much, again, you get the deck of cards that leads to this whole thing, and the discovery of all these things in the first novel, then the resolution of the Eric thing in the second novel. It almost feels like then he had to figure out what to do next, and that's why there's a shift. I don't know. That's just
Right.
what it kind of feels like.
Well, so I'll say this. So one of the things that was I found really charming about Zelazny in person was that he was very matter of fact about writing.
Yeah,
And you and I have certainly met or seen interviews with writers where they talk about the craft of writing and how you plumb the depths of the soul and the unique insights that you acquire as a fiction writer. Anyway, and he was just
stop making fun of me, Tom. No.
and Zelazny was the opposite of that. He's just kind of
Yeah,
like, yeah, there's a craft to it. I have a job, so I have contracts that I have to fulfill.
yeah.
He said one of his books was not the best. He needed to write something,
Damnation
and
Alley.
no, it was Doorways in the Sand.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But other times he had a lot more inspiration,
Yeah.
and it just I felt like he had a ton of inspiration for the first two books.
Right.
He had an inspiration for how to conclude that first set of
Hmm.
books. And then, maybe at times some of the inspiration flagged a little bit.
Yeah. I think this is my theory. My theory is he put the Black Road in the first two novels and didn't fully know what it was,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
then had to figure out what it was ex post.
yeah. And it doesn't make these bad books. It just means that
No, not at all.
the
Not at
the
all.
the three, four, and five are not as good as one and two.
Or why Bran was in
Oh
prison.
yeah, yeah,
The one thing I didn't mention, Brand is actually a pretty cool adversary. So
definitely.
Brand is this brother who apparently studied with Dworkin, and he and Fiona both are the ones who are interested in the magic part of all this. And Brand becomes, as he's described by one of the characters, a living Trump. He can actually teleport himself places, and is trying to rewrite the pattern so he can create his own version of Amber. So he's a pretty apocalyptic bad guy, and he's very interesting, and he's that makes for an interesting set of conflicts in those last three books.
Yeah, and you reading it, you want to see him taken down.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So I think we've covered all the cool ideas. We talked about Shadow and
Mhm.
the two cities and the Trumps. We didn't talk about, I'm going to say this wrong, uh, Tirna Nogoth, which is this when the moonshine reflection of amber when they can like
Yeah,
get these visions, but
that was
only exists
awfully
as long as the
cool.
moon is shining.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like that a
I like
lot.
the idea that if the moon goes behind the clouds and it disappears, you're going to fall out of the sky.
Exactly.
That was pretty good.
Whoops.
Yeah. Zelazny does have this obsession with reflections in his novels, right? There's the
Mhm.
undersea version of Amber, there's the Vandermeer in the
Right.
sky, and of course all the shadow stuff. Anything else? Any cool ideas I forgot to mention that's worth
Well, I
talking
want to
about?
ask, so in the next episode, when we talk about aliens, we're going to talk about what's the most 80s thing about the movie Aliens.
Hmm.
What was the most 60s or 70s thing about this series?
The misogyny?
Well, I was going to say the smoking.
Yes, there is smoking.
There's a
Yes, lots
lot
of
of
smoke.
smoking.
There's a lot of smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've now really because I made such a big deal about the smoking in Alien. Every time I watch anything now with space smoking, I'm like, well, also Planet of the
Stop.
Apes. Stop,
Right.
stop your space smoking. Yeah, there was a lot
Yeah.
of smoking.
So again, it's not that the misogyny was as toxic or venomous
Oh
as
no,
like the
no.
men's magazines of the 60s,
Oh no. It was
but
almost, it just, the women felt almost just, they were like set dressing. They weren't,
yeah.
or they just didn't matter that much. I mean, again, Fiona becomes important, but I mean, on balance, they just, early on, Flora has a role in the beginning, but it's not that deep, and the rest of them are just sort of there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see here. We already
So
let's talk a little bit. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, my other thing I wanted to say was this made me a Zelazny fan.
Oh
The
yes,
first two books especially, and then Lord of Light, which won the Hugo Award
yes,
for Best Novel. That was terrific. I love
yes,
that
it
one.
was.
Jack of Shadows already mentioned. There's a
Yes,
novella, The Doors of His Face, The Lamps of His Mouth, that was terrific. Night in the Lonesome October is a really fun book that
yes,
also throws curves at you a lot. Anyway, just he was a terrific writer,
he
and I
was.
was grateful that these books introduced me to him.
Agreed, agreed. Yeah, Damnation now is not that great, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's an even worse movie.
Oh, the movie's terrible. Was it Jan Michael Vincent in that movie?
Yeah, and George Papard.
Oh, I forgot that part. I
But
only watched it because I had read the novel. At that point, I was anything I could find at the used bookstore by Zelazny I bought, and it was on TV. I'm like, oh, this is not
yeah,
good.
if we did an episode on that movie, it would be a hate watch for sure.
Oh, totally. Okay. So I do want to come back just briefly. I mean, maybe it's not just a brief conversation, but again, sort of world building and general plot thoughts. So I think we already kind of talked. So do you think there was too much, not enough, or just right world building in these novels?
Oh, I thought there was just right.
Yeah.
You didn't need more, and given the nature of the books, you had a certain amount of complexity because of the unfamiliarity of the sort of fantasy setting, and you were kind of discovering it as you went.
Hmm.
Plus the complexity of the characters and plots that they were spinning and so forth. I think if they had tried to do more world building, the books might have collapsed under their own weight.
No, that's possible. I'm going to say mostly just right. I would have it would have some of the world building, for lack of a better way of putting it, feels like a first draft, and maybe a second draft of the world building would have been helpful. So again, some of it I just kind of doesn't make sense. But like again, the one true world that really isn't the original world, or where these people came from, or how. But I don't know that I needed a big story about how they populated Amber. But it it just some left me a little wanting, but nothing like super problematic. And mostly the fact it's focused on the characters and their conflict. That's really what matters for these books.
Yeah, it was enough world building to make the story interesting,
Yes.
to have context for the characters, for there to be some sort of rules in place that what was happening didn't seem arbitrary. And as I said, both in the podcast and when I posted on Substack, I'm a big fan of starting with minimalist world building and then
Hmm.
just filling in as you go
Right.
and not trying to overdo it.
Yeah. Well, I like more than you do, but yeah, overdoing can be a problem. How about one final discussion question? Would
Okay.
this series make for a good prestige TV show series or a set of movies?
Oh, definitely. I think so. Yeah.
I think it'd make a great it could be a great TV series. And the only caveat that I would give to that is and this is possibly dangerous, but you'd have to flesh out some of these characters and some of the story to make it work on TV, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're just going to
Yes.
have to add things that are not in the text. So it had to be someone who's good at that kind of thing and not just sort of winging it.
Well, better that than butchering a well-developed character in the
Yes,
translation from the written word to the
right.
screen.
That's
And
right.
also, these books would work well because they are so visual. So, like
Yes.
the passages through Shadow are
Hmm.
incredibly visual moments. In fact, almost too much at times. Like you and I, before we
Right.
recorded this, we were talking about Amber and the hell rides. Where they're kind
Yeah.
of like charging through Shadow almost at random. Some of those are a bit tedious.
Yes.
And I there's plenty of material to work with. It's just a question of how much of it to use.
That's right. No, the Hell Ride stuff, and I think we both you start to skim them after a while
Yeah.
because it's just Zelazny does this thing where he's just giving you pieces of description with multiple ellipses to like connect it all together, page after page. And I'm like, I'm not sure this is adding anything to my understanding of what's going on here.
Right. And because you only see it in passing. You see the shadow where there are rocks floating and
Yeah,
there
that's
are
right.
dogs and cats living together, and then they move on to another one.
Cats and dogs living together in total chaos. Yeah, and I feel like he did something similar in Doors in the Sand,
Yeah.
which I haven't read since high school, but that ellipses thing he does. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay. Um, so unless there's anything that we've left out about the books themselves you want to talk about, let's talk about merch.
All right. So I had two things I want to mention. One
Okay.
was when I first discovered the books, there was a nice little poster of the Jeff Jones art. I think it was for the Guns of Avalon.
This
Let me
one?
see. No.
That's the Guns of Avalon.
Right. It was a knight
It's the
on
only one that I
horseback.
have of this.
Yeah. It was either Nine Princes in Amber or Guns of Avalon,
Okay.
an early edition of those. The other thing which was really fun was there is a role-playing game that advertises as requiring no dice to play.
Right. Right.
That was based on Amber, and we played that once, and it was a ton of fun.
Cool. So I think I mentioned it earlier in another episode. I had a video game based on Nine Princes and Amber at one
Yeah.
point, but I also have when I met Zelazny, I have autographed books. So I do have a Courts of Chaos autographed by him, and Mad.
Great.
We didn't mention this, the Changeling Saga, which I wish he'd written more of Mad Wand. I have Mad
Hmm.
Wand, and I think I have another Amber novel somewhere. I couldn't find it, but it didn't look very hard. So that was cool. It's one of the few kinds of cases where I have something like that where I was able to get an author to sign books back when they didn't charge to do that. That's why we're so ancient. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. How about what some of you would wanted?
So I definitely wanted a pack of Trumps.
Oh, totally. That's my thing. Absolutely. I still wouldn't mind a pack of Trumps.
And there is one out there, and I've never bought it. I did get the illustrated guide to Castle Amber, which is
Yeah,
kind of
I
fun.
remember it. I remember. Yeah, I
Yeah,
never had it, but
yeah, and there's also another like sort of encyclopedia of Amber
right.
if people are looking
Yes.
for it. But
Yeah. There's also a collection of short stories I've been meaning to get and I have not acquired. I think I read one of them. But anyway,
Yeah, so that's actually, I think you mentioned the short stories. This is a setting that would be good for serialized TV in part because it's fairly open-ended, right?
right. That's right.
There is an epic saga, but you can kind of fill in a lot, with little episodic things about, someone traipsing off into shadow and encountering intrigues
Yes,
and perils and
absolutely.
other interesting
Absolutely.
things, or the court intrigue within, the Amber, the Amber family itself, or crazy stuff with the courts of chaos. There would be a lot to work with.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I said, I've read the second series. It starts strong and ends weak, but I think it's because he was getting sick
Hmm.
and didn't really
That's
finish it.
that's
So
sad.
I don't know if we'll ever talk about that or not, but it's there. But I think that may bring us, unless there's something I'm forgetting, to our conclusion of our discussion this week of Roger Zelazny's first Amber series here on Ancient Geeks. So we thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week when we talk about Aliens, second Alien movie.
Aliens.
Y'all take care.
Before we take that hell ride off into shadow, we just wanted to thank you for listening. You can find us on the podcast app or platform of your choice, where we are grateful if you subscribe and leave a comment. If you have kind words for us, or even less than kind words for us, send them along to someancientgeeks@gmail.com. Look for us on Substack at someancientgeek.substack.com, and you can also find us on social media on Reddit, Facebook, and Blue Sky. All content copyright 2025, Tom Grant and Stephen Taylor. Music by Reversed Image, you can find on Pixabay. See you next time.